grandmother ran into this con artist by the name of Colonel Storrs.
Okay.
They lived in Southern California.
All right.
And Colonel Storrs convinced my grandmother that he had a worthwhile gold mine up in Calaveras County. Now, Calaveras County, of course, is right in the middle of gold country. We all know that. That's all clear. So it seemed credible. Okay, so this talking head convinced my grandmother to go look at this mine.
Okay.
Well, she didn't go look at the mine. She sent my dad to go look at the mine. So my dad came up to Calaveras County,
Okay.
and he looked at the mine, was not impressed, but he was impressed with Calaveras County and the fact that there were logging jobs. If you wanted a job and you could work and you were young and healthy, you got a job. I mean,
Wow.
there was no such thing as a resume or, I want a job. What can you do? Boom, you had a job.
Wow.
So my dad got a job. I'm trying to think if he got the job. I think he got a job at the sawmill first. So he worked not in Martell, but in a place called Associated, which is up in Wilseyville. The Associated Mill.
Okay.
It was a going concern, and so. Okay, let's back up a little bit. So he went up and looked at this mine and said, Mom, this guy, nah. So, but at the time my dad worked for LA Water and Power.
Oh,
He worked for
okay.
the water company, I guess.
Like the utilities.
Yeah, he commuted to work. And I think my mom, I'm not sure what my mom was doing at that time. She was she graduated from UCLA, and he had been in the military in Texas, and he came back to Southern California and got this job. I'm not sure what my mom was doing, but so my dad fell in love with this. I can get a job. We can move out. Oh, the story was that on his way to work, he got into 3 fender benders. One on the way to work, 2 on the way home, heavy traffic, no freeways at the time. So he was, I got to get out of here. Betsy, we got to get out of here. And she agreed. And so they finagled around, and they found a piece of property to look at, which is where we ended up.
Okay.
And they went up, not me, way before me, Mom and her sister, my Aunt Peggy, they went up to look at this piece of property.
Okay.
And it was like April or May. Remember, these are young women from Southern California. Well, they're looking at this spring, it's beautiful, this big huge puffy cloud comes over, and it starts to snow. Oh, they're just, they just totally fell in love with the place. So soon after that property visit, Mom and Dad and Peggy and her husband all came up and landed on this piece of property in 1947, where we are right now. So the property, I've been there the whole time.
Oh, wow.
Starting in 1947, my sisters, I have older sisters,
Okay.
so they would remember the property as it was when they moved up. I didn't get born until 53, so I was quite a bit later.
So were there already houses on the property?
There was a log house on the property.
Okay.
Not horizontally logged, vertically logged.
So they
stand the log.
They
I
just
can't
stood them
remember.
up?
Yeah,
Oh.
they were upright
okay.
and attached at the bottom and the top, and chinking. And I can remember pulling chinking out of the logs in my room. But yeah, so they moved there, and Dad worked at the sawmill. He got that first job at the sawmill. And my mom got a job with the doctor. There was a doctor's office. Stephen Teal. Now,
Oh.
Highway 26 going between Moke Hill and West Point is called the Stephen P. Teal Highway.
Yes.
Stephen Teal was a doctor, but then he was also a state senator. And he was instrumental in changing that logging road into a state highway. He's the one
Really?
that did it. He turned Highway 26 into Highway 26. Up until then, it was just a company road all the way, going from Amador and Calaveras County.
So, and what company owned it at that time?
Might have been Winton Lumber Company.
Okay. Because there were a
I'm
lot.
not sure about that.
But there were, how many lumber companies?
Oh,
that you
many.
could
There were
remember?
many. There was, Associated. There was a mill in Martell. There was a couple of smaller mills way up the hill past Lily Gap. There were several mills.
Okay.
Stockton Box, which was just up the hill from where I live. Stockton Box was a big mill that there's still a mill site up there somewhere. So anyway, yeah, so my mom was working with the doctor, and my dad was working at the mill, and then my dad found out he could make more money working in the woods, and my mom, with her degree from UCLA, started teaching at the school. She didn't have a teaching degree, so she commuted for a while to get her teaching degree, but she spent several years without a teacher's credential teaching at West Point School back in the, in the 50s.
So your mom already had a degree from UCLA,
Mm-hmm.
which would have been unusual for her to have a degree back then.
Yeah, I suppose it would have been unusual for that high of an education level for a woman. I mean, there's other stories. I won't go into that.
Okay. Okay.
That's getting
I'll
off
trust
track.
you. Okay,
Anyway,
so
yeah, mom had this degree, but she didn't have a teaching credential. So
Yeah.
at some point, she went to Sac State, commuted back and forth, and got her teaching credential.
Okay.
I mean, they were pretty fast and loose with teachers back in the 50s and 60s. If you were an educated person and you could control a classroom, then you had a job. But,
And so what was your mom's name again?
Betsy Willard.
Okay.
Betsy Willard, yeah.
And then what was your dad's name?
Jess Willard,
And
Junior.
Then Junior. So he went into the forest to work.
He went into the forest.
Okay. So now, during that time, were there the rules for all of the forestry people to go into, because I'm thinking like a certified forester. Did they have that type of regulation back then?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I don't know if the U.S. Forest Service, I mean, this property was company owned.
Ah,
You know,
okay.
like I said, there's 75,000 acres in Calaveras County alone. It's owned by the company, and it's been passed from company to company since then. So I think most of the falling jobs my dad had was on private company land.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't just in Calaveras County where he worked. He worked elsewhere. He worked up Highway 50. He had several other jobs that he worked.
So he went into quite a few of the different forests in the Sierra Nevada.
Oh,
then.
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
his first job, I think I can remember him coming home. There was an enormous fire called the Bailey Ridge Burn. And I don't know how many acres it was. It was probably minuscule compared to the fires now that we have to measure in square miles instead of acres. But it was a big fire back then, and it did some major destruction. Well, one of his first falling jobs was to go up and fall burning trees. I mean, the fire had spent itself, right? But there was still trees smoking. So he would go up and he would fall those burning trees so they could put them out so that the wind wouldn't come up and spread sparks and start a new fire. So I can remember him coming home covered with soot, with black, face to head to toe black, falling, burning trees.
I didn't even realize they did that.
Yeah, well, they did that then. I don't know if they do that now. But,
Okay.
But they didn't want, I mean, this was company land. They didn't want it to start again. And then after that, they started to replant. And they replanted thousands of trees, different ones. They planted redwoods. There you can find redwoods up in the Bailey Ridge area. And I can remember my mom and my dad must have brought home some of these redwood saplings. And West Point has redwood trees dating back to the late 50s, early 60s, whenever that fire happened. So the school has redwood trees, downtown has redwood trees, there's redwood trees around.
And those were brought from, your dad brought those back?
Well, I'm sure there was more than just
Other
him. I mean,
people,
lots
yeah.
of people had a job of replanting. But yeah, my mom got her hands on those trees and they planted them around the school, and you can still see those trees up there.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, wow. So your dad and other loggers from this area brought those seedlings, or were they
So they brought
seedlings
some of them
back?
home, yeah,
Okay.
and you know, they planted them around their
Planted
homes.
them around, and they're still around.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long did your dad work in the forest then?
Up until from like probably the early 60s. I don't know when I can't remember the transition between the sawmill and the woods. It was late 50s, early 60s. And he got injured in the woods in 1971.
Okay.
And that was the end of it for him.
But did he love the forest?
Love the forest.
Because some foresters
It's a
love
good
the
question.
forest.
He loved it up here.
Okay.
Yes, he loved it up here. I mean, the work was good, and you're out of the city. But actually, I think my dad always wanted to move to Hawaii.
So he wanted the palm trees,
He
right?
really liked the climate in Hawaii. No snow. He didn't like dealing with snow.
Oh, that's true.
That was a pain.
That's
You know,
true.
absolutely had to have a four-wheel drive. And he had some bad experiences not having a four-wheel drive in the snow.
So then when was the first time that he took you into the forest?
Well, my mom was probably more of a forest lover than my dad.
Oh, okay.
I mean, she did love going up to the creeks and rivers and streams, and I have very early memories. You know, born in 53, so probably 57 or 56, somewhere in there. We went up to Bruce's Crossing and Hunter Creek. Hunter Creek is a magic place. It's a really tiny creek. It's only about 5 miles long. It's got this really productive spring that feeds it. And it goes through this, part of it goes through this very steep canyon that's kind of a lot of lava outcropping, whatever that, it's not exactly lava, but I can't remember the name.
Like a lava cap type of
Yeah, it's
thing?
lava cap. So it's a really steep, rugged terrain that you have to go through to get to this little teeny tiny creek. And it meanders a bit, so you'll have, the creek is over here, and then over here there's this big place where a lot of trees grow, relatively flat, and they're huge sugar pines, and Doug firs, and ponderosas, and cedars, virgin timber, never been cut. It's absolutely shockingly beautiful. You have this little creek going through there, and there's ferns, and there's dogwoods, and there's yew trees, and it's absolutely stunning.
Wow.
And as I fished upstream as a 10 or 12-year-old, I got to there's little holes. It's a tiny creek, but it has fish, right? It doesn't, at that time, it had never dried up in the summer. So, yeah, there were little teeny tiny fish, but I catch those little brook trout and rainbows and German browns. And as you're going upstream, I noticed this nice waterfall. Well, waterfalls usually mean a nice water hole to catch fish. Well, I'm looking at, and then I see that there's another waterfall. And then there's another waterfall. And there's another waterfall. There's a amazing cataract that comes down on Hunter Creek from way up. And I think I read somewhere that it is the highest cataract in Calaveras County. I don't know about that for sure, but it's just beautiful. There's ferns and moss and, oh man, And then later, I took people down there because it was so beautiful. Hard to get down there, hard to get out of. I don't know if I could do it now, maybe. But it's just beautiful. And then we went down there and we found somebody had created a gorilla grow off one of the little canyons. Somebody growing cannabis.
Okay.
And they ran a hose from one of the top cataracts around the hill and went up this little draw, and they were servicing it all on motorcycles. So this beautiful place had this like a dirt bike track going through it. I was very disappointed. I went to the Forest Service and told them about it, and my first experience with the Forest Service unable to do anything even on their own property, because the parts of Hunter Creek that are so beautiful is in the Stanislaus National Forest. That's why they weren't cut. Or one of the reasons. It's very steep. Back in the day, it would have been prohibitively expensive to get to those few virgin trees.
Okay, so they just left them alone then?
They left them alone.
Okay.
But now we got this issue. I haven't been back up there in years, so I don't know where the motorcycle racetrack
It's
status
still there.
is. But
Yeah, if it's still there or not, you don't know.
yeah, I don't know.
So how did your mom find out those little hidden places then?
Well, my dad knew about Hunter Creek.
Okay.
And my dad knew about Bruce's Crossing, and he took her there, and then she loved it. You know, she went out, and it's very difficult to transplant wild plants from the wild to your house.
Okay.
But she dug up some giant trillium and managed to propagate them at the house. She dug up some bleeding hearts, which is a beautiful long. It bloomed for 2 or 3 months in the spring into the summer. She managed to propagate them at the house. So I still have them. I still enjoy them in my backyard, my giant trillium and my bleeding hearts. They're just beautiful.
So she was a gardener.
She could garden, yes.
Okay.
She loved her roses.
Oh.
And of course, but the thing is, after she worked for the doctor's office, but soon after that, she got her teaching certificate. She taught at West Point School
Okay.
for quite a while.
So did she plant any of the old growth roses? Were there any of the old growth roses on your property?
No, like wild roses. She does have a wild rose, but I think it's from Southern California.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's where her parents lived. And no, she went down, there was a Japanese garden, I can't think of the word.
Okay, like a garden center or
Where she would go
something?
down in Sacramento and get roses.
Oh, okay. So she had a certain
She had
nursery that
an
she liked
assortment
down
of,
there.
yeah, a nursery, that's the word I would
Okay,
get.
okay.
But yeah, she liked to get her roses from there, and she had a lot of very beautiful roses.
Oh, okay. And are those still blooming?
Some of them are still there.
Some of them are still
I
there.
haven't been as diligent as I should have.
So you ended up staying in the area. Did you ever move away?
Yes, I was away for a while. I moved
Okay.
up to Montana,
Oh, wow.
and I worked in a plywood mill in Montana.
Okay.
And I was up there for 2 or 3 years, and that's where I met my wife, Jeanette.
Mm-hmm.
She was also working at the plywood mill.
Okay.
And then the mill was gonna close, so I knew I could get a job down here at the mill, and we moved. And at the time, there was two houses on the property where I live,
Okay.
and one is a rental, and the rental was vacant, so we moved down into that house. My mom and dad lived up in their house, and we lived in the rental. And my first job back home was picking walnuts.
So where did you, in West Point? Is
Yeah.
that where you were picking them?
Yeah,
Oh.
there's a lot of walnut orchards in West Point.
Okay.
They're all over the place.
So when you were in high school though, or as a young person, what was your first job then?
I did have a job hoeing around walnut trees.
Okay, okay.
Big
So you're
orchard,
familiar
lots
with
of
walnut
hoeing.
trees then?
Pardon me?
You're familiar with walnuts?
Yeah, familiar
Walnuts
with
in
walnuts.
West Point.
Yeah, there's two
Okay.
different kinds that I know of.
Okay. So then when you moved to Montana, you came back, and then what did you do after you did the
Not
walnut?
long after I came back, I got a job at the my job at the plywood mill. I worked there
Okay.
and I worked there for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then the plywood mill closed, and I bumped into the sawmill because I had seniority.
Oh, now were they all owned by the same company then?
Yes.
What company were they owned by at that time?
I want to say Georgia Pacific, but and then there was KK&R, maybe Bendix,
Okay,
which was a offshoot of Ford Motor Company, but Bendix. I think
Okay.
Bendix was who owned the plywood mill and the sawmill when I first came back.
okay. So how long did you stay in the mills then? Like working for the mills?
I worked for the mill for 14 years.
Oh, you worked there a long
And
time.
that didn't count the time I worked right out of school.
Okay,
So I'm going to say all in all, I probably worked close to 20 years in plywood, counting Montana.
Wow. And then how many people worked in the company locally too, in the mill at that time?
I'm thinking around 100, but then there was also the planer and particle board, and of course, in the beginning, plywood. So, you know, I'm trying to remember how many people got displaced when they closed. It was over 200 people that lost their jobs when the whole thing shut down.
And what year did it end up shutting down?
94.
So it wasn't that long ago.
Was it 94 or 96? Maybe 96.
I thought
I
it
think
was
96.
somewhere in there
And
is what I'm
before
remembering.
Martell closed, the cedar mill closed.
And
which
where
was,
was
the cedar mill was over in Pioneer.
Okay,
And that employed 75 or 80 people.
so there was a successive closing of the mines.
Well, yeah, the mines closed in the 80s.
Oh, sorry, I meant the.
And then the sawmills, you know, Associated closed back in the 60s. And then Martell closed 96, I'm going to say.
And were there a lot of people from West Point that worked over in the Martell mine? Or sorry, I keep on thinking
Martell
mining.
sawmill, yeah.
Because
there
we
was quite a
talked
few.
about mining before.
Yeah, there was quite a few West Pointers who worked either directly in the mill or as logging truck drivers or cat skinners or, I mean, you have all these different, you know, mechanics, millwrights,
Okay.
a lot of skill levels when it came to the logging industry.
So then where did they work after the mill closed then? Just
I
everywhere?
didn't track them down.
Oh, okay,
You know,
okay.
I, you know, moved away. I'm trying to get mills at Camino or Sonora, Hayfork. I mean,
Okay,
or you know, they did something else entirely. I mean, I worked at a light manufacturing building these little electric scooters
oh, wow.
over in Moke Hill,
Okay,
and I did that for a year or two. And I did construction. I worked with a contractor. While I was working at the mill, I worked for a contractor. I would work, because I worked swing shift, I could start around 10 o'clock and work until about 2:30, working with a contractor. So I developed that skill, ran sewing machines,
okay.
industrial big Juki sewing machines. And
So back then, were there actually more industrial endeavors? Like you said you worked for a scooter building.
yeah, light
company.
manufacturing, I mean, I couldn't say generally.
Okay,
Uh,
okay,
I don't think very much.
Okay.
Some, but not much. A little mom and pop,
all right,
they got a big metal building and they make something. And they
okay,
may employ one or two people.
okay. Just
I mean, the
just
sewing
slightly
job I
more
had
than
was
now.
like that.
Okay, all right. So how did you end up getting into mining then?
I think I was between jobs. It was after the plywood mill. I'm fuzzy about that.
Okay,
But
okay.
somewhere in there I was between jobs.
Okay,
And it was practically walking distance from my house. I mean, the Blazing Star Mine, I live out Bald Mountain Road,
Okay.
so I live a mile from Bummerville, and
Uh-huh.
that's where the Blazing Star was. So
Okay.
here's a job that's gonna pay some pretty good money,
Mhm.
and it's right there. It's just
Mhm.
close.
Okay.
So it was a pretty good job. I made some good money, especially after I got that rock drill in my hands.
Okay.
I mean, the truck driving was, ore truck and the mucker, the
Mhm.
little front end loader, that was good pay. And then I graduated from that to being what's called a nipper, which is a miner's helper.
Okay.
So you have a contract miner who runs the drill, and I helped him. All kinds of stuff to be done while he's drilling.
Okay.
And then after a while, because they were doing such a big tunnel, after a while, he taught me how to run a rock drill, and then he would do this half, and I would do this half. And we'd drill at the same time. We'd have two drills going
So
at
you
once.
both would be drilling the same tunnel?
Yeah.
Wow. And then who owned the mine then?
I couldn't tell you. It was Troy
Okay.
Gold, which was a Canadian company. They owned it back then. I don't know if they still have mineral rights. The property it's unused. It's
Okay,
dead.
it's shut down now.
Yeah. The
So,
building of the big the crusher and the ball mill and
Mhm.
that structure is still there, but I haven't gone over there to look in
A while. So how many people were working there at the mine when you were there?
Well, counting the drivers, the people in the ball mill, I want to say 35 or 40.
Oh, so quite a few.
Yeah, it was a going operation. I have a picture somewhere, which I should have brought with me, that has the whole crew, and there was quite a few people in
So-
that picture.
So when we were talking before, you talked about like a spiral tunnel being built around kind
Around
of
the shaft.
around the shaft.
Yeah,
So tell me how that ended up happening. Did people not want to go down the shaft anymore, or?
well, I think Troy Gold just thought it was a faster way to get the job done.
Okay.
The ore trucks went in and out, they were fast, and it was just the way they did it, I mean, when you have a shaft, you have to have cables and elevators, and you're going in and out of this. It's just the ramp is just a different approach. And so you timber in, and you hit solid rock, and you build this whole tunnel going around this shaft. And you probably save the money with that. I mean, I explained to you the airflow,
Yeah.
how it works with two different height openings.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was where they could save money. Yeah, they blew air down into the shaft, but they also had this naturally occurring ventilation.
Because of the
different,
spiral.
no, because of the difference in height.
Okay.
The shaft is up here, the vertical shaft up here, and the entrance to the spiraling ramp is down here, and that difference causes a draft.
Okay,
Makes
so
a draft.
it pushes the air through.
Yeah, the air gets sucked down the shaft and blown out the tunnel.
Okay. And there's extra like fans and that type of thing that are down there as well?
Yes, there are fans down there. After you hit the bottom of the shaft, if you want to go deeper, you have to force air down into those other tunnels. And plus, if you're away from the main tunnel, all those side offshoots, they call them drifts, they have to have air pumped in them too.
So how many drifts, like side tunnels, are working at a time?
Well, 4 or 5.
Oh, so quite a few.
Yeah.
And how many workers are in each drift?
Well, you have a miner and his helper. So
Okay.
some miners didn't have nippers. Most did. I did not have a nipper. I worked on my own. I was mostly doing raises.
Okay.
So it was a small place.
Okay.
Really wasn't room for another person to be in there. The main tunnel is where you needed the miner's helper, the nipper.
Okay.
Because it's a lot of holes and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of dynamite to haul down, and
So you're
of
like,
equipment.
explain to me, how you would move forward in a tunnel. Like, how would you blow it out, with
You
explosives?
really want me to
or-
explain that to you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. The way we did it, we would make either 6-foot holes or 8-foot holes.
Okay.
All right? And so you have these rock drills, they're like a jackhammer, they hammer and rotate, right? And they have this pneumatic leg on them. So you have a control, and you turn this knob, and it's a telescoping leg, and it will push the machine forward, right? So you turn this knob, and
Okay.
the harder you turn it, the more it pushes. So you can have it real subtle and just barely push forward. And then you have this lever that is your rotating hammer.
Okay.
So you have this, what we call drill steels. You put it in the machine, there's a
Okay.
chuck, and you put a little thing over it so it won't fly out. And at the end of this drill steel, you have a bit, right? It's pounded on.
Okay.
And so we drilled a 3-inch hole. So we had a 2, 4, and 6-foot drill steel that would drill this 3-inch hole, right? You're going in 6 feet, you lined up which direction you want to go, and so you drill, so you have a 2-footer, you drill 2 feet, you pull out, take that still out, put in a 4-footer, go back in the hole, drill in 2 more feet, pull out, take the 4-footer out, put the 6-footer in the hole, put the machine back on the drill, the steel, and drill 2 more feet. Sometimes we go 8 feet, but that's just one more step, right? So
Okay.
now you've got this 2-inch hole.
Yeah.
You put all those drill seals aside, they have these 3-inch bits, and now you have these 1 1/4-inch bits that go on the end of the same steel,
Okay.
right? We had a tool called a wrap wrench, which is like a pipe wrench with a hammer on it. And if you
Okay.
hit these bits just right, they would just pop off. So you take that bit off, put on a new bit,
Okay.
and then you would get as close to this 3-inch hole with an 1 1/4 hole as you could get without slipping into that hole, right? So you would start a new hole. And none of this is particularly easy, you know. The rock face is not a nice flat thing. It's this way and that way, and so you got to lean your drill over. And we were dressed in these, we called them diggers. They were like a rain suit. So you had this bib, rain pants, and a jacket, and rubber gloves, and rubber boots, and you would, here's where sometimes I would help the miner. I would hold the rotating, hammering drill steel with my gloved hands,
Okay.
we're trying to get a hole started. You know, trying to get a hole going this way, and the rock is going this way. So you're hitting it at an angle. So you got to hold the drill steel and the bit to this angled rock to get it. And if you hold it there and it's not going full blast, not being the pressure isn't putting on, it's just going slow and easy. And there's water squirting out of the end of the drill bit, and you get this. The rock finally chips away enough to where the bit is started, and I no longer have to hold it there. You got an inch or 2 hole in the rock face now, and then you just pour it on. You know,
Okay.
the rotating hammer goes full blast. You crank on the air, and you just drill your hole, and you just do that over and over and over again in a pattern. So you got this 3-inch hole. You got a hole close to it. You got a hole a little bit farther away from it. A little bit farther away still, a little farther away still, and then you start doing a pattern going out from there.
Okay.
And you end up with, I don't know, 40 or 50 holes. When you go to, okay, you're done drilling, right? All that stuff is out of the way. You've got all these holes, and now you have 2 or 3 cases of dynamite, and you have these 10-foot long fuses with a blasting cap on the end. They were orange, right? So there's a blasting cap and an orange fuse. Now those orange fuses were rated at so many inches per second. So it would give you maybe 10 minutes, right? Very precise, 10 minutes.
Wow,
So,
okay.
okay, so now you take your first stick of dynamite, you crack it open, dynamite is about that long, about an inch and an eighth around, so it fits in your inch and a quarter hole. And you would take your blasting cap and you would stuff it into the end of your stick of dynamite. It's kind of a waxy material.
Yeah, okay.
And then you'd bend it around, and then you would take a piece of PVC and you would push that into the back of the hole and pound it until it was really tight. And then you would just crack another piece of dynamite and stick it in until you came all the way out to the end. So you'd have, I don't know, 6 feet, an 8-inch stick of dynamite, however many it took, I can't remember how many it took to do that. So you would end up doing that to all the holes. So all these, 40 or so holes, you have this 2 feet of orange fuse sticking out of all these holes. Now we had this other kind of fuse, we call it spitter cord,
Okay.
right? So you would take your spitter cord and you would start on the outside, and at the other end, so on one end of this fuse is this blasting cap, on the other end of this thing is this little split, it's like a fishing weight, you have this little split and it's lead and you can push it together.
Okay.
Well, that's what you put this spitter cord and press this end piece, and it would clamp down onto the spitter cord. So the last stick of dynamite you want to go up, the last hole you want to blast will be the first one where you put the spitter cord. There's the end of the spitter cord, and you go to this one, and you just work your way around, all the way around, until you get to the hole you want to blast first.
Okay.
And you attach your spitter cord to the end of that,
Yeah.
and then you run it out a little ways. That wasn't such a precisely made fuse, but it gave you more time. So it was more than 10 minutes
Okay.
before your first first hole would blast, right?
Okay.
So you have this all ready, and then you have this, you're ready to go, and you're waiting on other miners to be ready to go, and most of them are ready to go. And you have this little, one of the muckers, one of the little front end loaders would come by with a trailer, and everybody would load up on the trailer, and we'd be down at the very bottom of the mine, and that would be the person to light their spitter cord first. Light this cord, and we go up, pick up the next miner, he would light his spitter cord, then you just go on the way out, and everybody would be ready to go. And by the time you pick up the last miner and you're headed out, you're hearing the first blast go off.
So you were all coordinated with each other as far
Oh
as...
yeah, when you blast, you don't want to be, it's not a good thing to be in the mine while all this stuff, the closer you are to the bottom, the more dramatic it becomes, right? So
Okay.
you want to be pretty much headed out before that first blasting cap blows.
So how many different areas were typically blasted?
5 or 6.
So it would be like in 5 or 6 of the tunnels that you guys were working in?
Tunnels, raises, or stopes, yeah.
Okay.
There'd be either people going straight up or people doing drifting off the main tunnel. Flat,
wow.
or, there's raises, draw points, stopes. These are all terms that.
So just out of curiosity, for like people who are watching this, what is a raise, a strope, or a tunnel? What's the difference between the different areas that you're mining in?
Well, the main haulage was that 8 by 10.
Yes.
And then off of that, you would have these, you would go through veins, right? So every time you went through a vein, that's a place where you're going to drive another little tunnel. Those didn't necessarily have to be as big, but it had to be big enough to get an ore truck in and a mucking machine. So you would follow the vein, and the vein was usually going at about a 45-degree angle around here. So if you have your vein going up this way, your tunnel's going this way, so you drill this way into what's called a draw point. And you go in there 10 or 12 feet, and then you go straight up until you hit the vein. Then you angle your raise, which is like mine were usually 4x4 or something like that,
Okay.
25 holes. And then you would follow the vein, and then the higher you go up, you follow the vein in to the left and to the right. So now you don't have a 4x4 raise anymore. It's maybe I've narrowed it down to 3 feet, but it's 10 feet that way and 10 feet that way. So it's 20 feet with the vein going right through the middle.
Okay.
You're looking up, and it's 20 feet long. It's like a big crack. You've developed this big opening in the rock,
Okay.
and you just work your way up. And the farther you spread it out, the more holes you can have 150 or 200 holes you've drilled over the last couple of days
Oh, wow.
to follow this vein.
So then how can you tell where a vein is?
Well, it's obvious.
Okay.
It's a quartz. The granite is gray or black.
Okay.
And you get different, it's not all granite, we ran into this really black rock, I can't remember what it was called, but man, it was hard, it would dull your drill bit fast. It was really hard rock. And there was a lot of, not only did they sell gold, they also had a market for tungsten, so there was a pretty high concentration of tungsten associated with the vein that we were following. But it's obvious, the vein is a quartz vein and on, white. And,
So you can actually see it.
oh yeah, I mean,
And you had said earlier that you could, when you drill, you can kind of smell. There's a certain
right, there's
smell.
a distinctive sulfurous odor in some of these veins that when you drill into it, you can really smell it.
Okay.
There's water going up your drill steel, so you're not getting dust out of it, you're getting this trickle of water coming out of your hole. It's funny, so you're dressed in these rain suits, right, and gloves and rubber boots, and if you're drilling straight up and you're reaching up and you're holding onto the drill and there's water running down and your glove is no longer tucked over your jacket and it's running down your armpit and down your side and into your boot, and you're in a hurry, you're not about to mess around, okay, just take it and drill. When I'm done with this hole, I'll readjust my glove and move off to this whole thing with the staging when you're drilling straight up, it was an engineering challenge
Okay.
to create the staging
And as a
drill off of it.
And so you said that you worked those areas a lot of times on your own. So then would you have to do the whole staging
Oh
as
yeah,
well?
it was all
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I developed this system. We had these steel ladders, and I made them, 3.5 feet long, and they're 12 or 14 inches wide, and I would hook chain to each corner. And the chain would go up to, whenever I drilled out a round, I would drill out 2 more holes that got no dynamite, going off at a really sharp angle into the side of my raise.
Okay.
And I would have an eye bolt, similar to those rock bolts that I described to you earlier. You drill a 2-foot hole, you have this eye bolt with a special bit or a special bolt on the end of it, you shove it in there and you tighten it up and it is not gonna come out.
Okay.
And I do one over here. So I have these 4 chains coming off this horizontal ladder,
Okay.
and I hook it to those eye bolts. And that's my staging. Then I put a board on top of that, and I had this special chain that I had set up with pipe welded to it at 2-foot intervals. So my 2-foot steel is here, my 4-foot steel is here, my
Okay.
6-foot steel is here, and it all comes up through my ladder, and I can reach it it's at hand.
Oh,
So,
okay.
when you're on the staging and you're drilling, I can only go 2 feet at a time. So I drill in 2 feet, I pull back, I take the 2-foot steel out, put it away, take the 4-foot steel, stick it up in the hole, stick it on my machine, and drill 2 more feet.
Okay. And let's go back to what we were talking about, I think you said this was when we were talking before the shale, like some of the,
Oh, yeah,
how you
okay.
would reinforce
Yeah,
those
yeah,
parts of the tunnel?
when you're drilling in a hard rock mine, it's not just granite, right? You go through these fault zones, and the fault zone is a different kind of rock. It's shale, lots of clay content, loose, it breaks away easily. So if you leave it to its own devices, pretty soon it's gonna cave in and cave in and cave in, and pretty soon you've got this vault in your tunnel that's kind of unmanageable. So what we did was, we had these, we would get chain link fencing, and we had these 8-foot, what we called rock bolts, which had the same kind of a nut on the end of it as my eye pins that I use to support my staging. So we would drill these 8-foot holes into this shaly stuff, and then we would thread the rock bolt with a big steel plate washer on it through this chain link fencing, and then we could, the machine, you just push it up with your machine, with your rock drill, and then rotate it to tighten up that nut, and that would suck that fencing right up to the back. We call the top of the tunnel a back. And we would suck that fencing right up tight to the back. And then we would put in lots of rock bolts, pulling all the fencing, so when any loose places is all nice and tight. So this whole threatening to cave in shaly fault zone has now got this storm fencing
Okay.
attached to it, right? It's all contained.
Yes.
Then we'd take this stuff called shotcrete, which was a pumped concrete, and then we would spray it with that, and that would really eliminate the problem of that shaly place peeling off and causing a nuisance.
So how much of the tunnel ended up being sort of that shaly?
Not very much,
Okay.
probably 3 or 4% in all. I mean, and as you're spiraling down, you're going to run into the same formation over and over again, so you have to do it periodically.
Okay. And I imagine you got to know when you're working the same mine when you were going to run into it again.
Yeah, sort of, but it was never the same. I mean,
Okay.
just like the vein that you're following, it gets bigger and smaller as you go through the rock.
Okay.
I mean, the most dangerous, I guess it was the Never Sweat. It was one of the veins a named vein called the Never Sweat.
Okay.
And one of the other miners was working in there, and it was a very productive vein, lots of gold.
Okay.
So he was making a stope, like I described this stope. Well, the stope got into one of these shaly places, but the shaly places was rich with gold. So they continued to mine in there, and it became a pain because part of that stope, not just small pieces would peel off. We're talking thousands of tons worth of rock just breaking off and coming down, and oh man, I'm glad I wasn't working that stope.
Wow. So if there's gold there, you just
there
keep
were
on pulling it out.
Risks were taken.
Oh. So I guess my next question would be, how do you keep a mine safe? If there's a vein that's
It's
going
a relative
through.
term.
Okay. Okay.
Safe compared to what?
Yeah.
What are you calling safe?
Okay.
Well, one of the things we would do, we had this tool, we would bar down. So it was a long aluminum pole with a steel bar at the end of it, curved like a crowbar.
Okay.
And we would spend a lot of time after we blasted and came back in and were washing down, we would spend a lot of time tapping on the back and on the side, finding loose rock. We're human, we don't want to hit the head with a rock. We had our helmets and all that stuff, our headlights but we tried to bar down as many loose rocks as we could possibly do. And you could get it down to the point where you're no longer worried about a rock getting loose and falling down from the back.
Okay.
So, we pay attention to the air quality a lot. That was important.
So
And washing down.
Okay.
Hosing down was very important. That would get
Right.
that blasting gas, dust and muck diluted enough to where it wasn't outgassing so much that it would cause problems. So we would wash
Okay.
down a lot. And when you're at the bottom of a tunnel, we have these air-powered water pumps.
Okay.
So we dig a little low point
Mm-hmm.
and we put this air-powered water pump in there, and it would just chug away while we were working, hosing down everything. So the water that accumulated in the bottom of the tunnel was getting pumped out,
Oh.
including all that nasty, mucky, mine gas-loaded stuff.
Okay. So did they periodically test the air, or?
There was a guy who came down, yeah, he had an air tester. Well, I mean, you could tell, you could smell whether or not your air was fresh. I mean, we were pretty diligent about getting our vent lines. They were fabric vent lines that came down to right where we were working. And maybe we would have 50 feet of vent line,
Okay.
and then after that we'd have metal vent line. So the metal vent line we have to protect from the explosion.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we would have to have this long bag line to
Okay.
get to the end, because you can't put a metal conduit right down where you're gonna blast, because tomorrow it's gonna be in shreds. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
would take the bag line down, we had a wooden cap that we put over the vent line
Oh, wow.
so that fly rock didn't destroy it.
So how often did you do blasting?
The idea was every day,
Really?
sure.
Wow.
Drill and blast daily,
Oh,
roar and bore, turn and burn.
wow.
So yeah, I mean, unless you're doing a stope that takes too many holes to do in one day, that's why the miner in the main haulage needs a helper.
Yeah.
To help speed everything up. You're drilling 50 or 60 holes, you need to have somebody helping you getting those holes started. You don't want to stop to go get dynamite. You want to have fresh drill steels there in case you hit a hard spot. So the miner is doing nothing but drilling.
Okay.
And when you're doing a smaller thing like a raise, it's only 4 feet, there's not room for 2 people up there anyway. So that's easier to get done in a day. But the idea was to drill and blast daily
Every day.
at $21 a foot,
Wow.
So you could get 6 feet a day, that's pretty good money.
Yeah.
Plus, if you're in a hot vein, you get a bonus for that.
Oh, so you got paid if.
It's
if
kind
you
of
found-
piecework
Oh.
was piecework. For the miners.
Wow.
The mucker drivers and the ore truck drivers and the nippers, they got paid by the hour.
Okay.
But if you were a nipper, it was pretty much expected that the miner would kick into the nipper's pay. $100,
Oh.
$200 a paycheck for his good help, right?
So
Helping that
how-
miner get the job done.
So how much did the nipper get paid per hour typically?
Wow. I'd have to go back and look at my pay stubs.
Okay.
15, 16 bucks an hour, which
Okay.
is pretty good back in the
Not
80s.
bad. Not bad. And then you said the miners got how much per foot?
$21 a foot.
21.
And they got paid for other things too. If you had to make a draw point, you got paid extra for that. And if you had to put in stalls, a stall is a wooden pillar that you use to stabilize the ground. There was so much a stall. If you had to build a draw point, you got paid for that. I got pictures of the draw point here. But there was a lot of wood was used down in the mine for draw points. A truck could back under, you would open a hatch and rock would flow into the truck from
Okay.
your stope or your raise.
Wow.
So that would happen, and bulkheads, there was a pay schedule for doing certain things.
So then as the miner, would you go back up and say, okay, I did this today, I did
Oh, no, they
this?
can see what you did.
They can see, okay, so they're keeping track of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
they go down, they see that you built a draw point or a bulkhead or, you blast, you got your 6 feet, That's obvious that you did your work, and
Yeah.
we're 6 feet farther down the mine.
So how many, I guess it would be miles of tunnels or can you even?
I have no clue.
Okay.
Once upon one time, I drew the mine. I have no idea what I did with that drawing. But there was tunnels, there was the main shaft, and there was tunnels, every time you hit a vein, they would tunnel off along it. Then you would, like I said, you'd build a draw point, and you would do raises. And it wasn't just named, there was the Never Sweat and the Blazing Star and the Last Chance and a whole bunch of other numbered
So
veins.
they were, each of the veins was named and numbered? Or named or numbered?
Named or numbered.
Okay.
There were named veins, and then there were veins we ran across that were not associated with the Never Sweat or the Blazing Star. There was certain veins that were named by the old timers, then we'd run into new veins that we just gave it numbers.
Okay. And then when the ore was pulled out and then taken to the top, what happened to it then?
Well, they had a big, large building that had a crusher
Yeah.
that the ore trucks could just back up to the crusher and dump. It was a big, noisy thing that they had these things called fatal grams.
Oh,
And they would put them up where we had our hat lights charging. So they'd have these fatal grams, and probably half of them were people who stumbled into the crusher.
oh, goodness.
Not a good thing. Between mining and logging are the two most fatality-prone occupations.
Are they?
Mining and logging.
Wow.
So anyway, so we had the crusher, and then after the crusher, it went into a ball mill, which ground the ore into basically dust, right? Mud, because there was water involved, but it's dust. Then you had these big shaker tables that this ground up ore would flow onto, and of course there was a shaker table, it was like a big gold pan, so you get gold at the bottom, and they'd separate the gold out. And I can remember a bunch of us were going into the mine, I worked swing shifts, so it was about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, we're walking down into the mine, and they're pouring gold bars. Okay, this got our attention. We all walked over and observed gold bars getting poured into molds. Oh, wow, look at that.
So how much gold was pulled out of that mine?
I don't know the tonnage.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
You don't, okay.
I don't know that number.
So
A lot.
how often were they pouring gold bars that you
Well,
noticed?
I'm recalling this one incident. They might have done it once a week,
Okay.
or so. I mean, most of the stuff had to be smelted.
Oh, okay.
And they would put the stuff that needed to be smelted into 55-gallon drums and load it in a truck and take it up to somewhere in Idaho to a smelter up there. They'd truck it away.
Wow.
There were no smelters in California.
Okay.
So they'd haul this other stuff. And that's how they'd get gold, and they'd get tungsten and some other trace elements that were worth some money. And you know, they paid the smelter what they owed them, and then they got the money for what was left.
Okay. So how many, and I may have already asked you this, but how many gold mines do you know of that were in the West Point area?
At that time,
Yeah.
somewhere between 10 and 15.
So there were quite
10
a
and
few.
20, 10, maybe 20.
So between the mining and the logging, were those like the highest employers in
Oh,
the
yeah.
area?
Well,
Okay.
mining was pretty brief. I
Okay.
mean, mining took place between the early 80s and mid 80s, right? So let's say a 5 or 6 year period where the price of gold was so good that big companies couldn't resist.
Oh,
And
okay.
of course, logging has taken place all through, you know.
Yeah.
It's still going on. There's logging trucks coming down Winton Road right now. But yeah, the mining was brief. It was
Okay.
a brief,
Relatively brief
interesting endeavor.
time. Interesting time.
Yeah, it was.
So did a lot of people in the West Point area, they go from logging to mining to back to logging again?
or moved away. I mean,
Oh.
you know, after the mills closed,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, there was still logging, but not for West Point. I mean, for West
Mhm.
Pointers, unless you're a truck driver,
Mhm.
much fewer jobs in the woods than back in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
Much fewer.
So
They're
it-
there. They log differently. They have these things called feller bunchers.
Mhm.
They do the job of a timber faller and someone who bucks and limbs, and
Mhm.
they even debark. I mean, if you ever watch these things work,
Yeah, just come in and strip the trees.
I mean,
And
yeah,
then-
it's a
yeah.
very fast operation. It
Mhm.
requires flatter ground,
Mhm.
so you still have fallers that are on the steeper ground, but
Mhm.
you know, it's different. It's way different.
So did it affect the West Point economy then? It did.
It tanked the West Point economy.
Okay.
Tanked it. I mean, that was it. You know,
Okay.
we had this big thing. The W. Alton Jones, Foothill Conservancy, Rocky Mountain Institute. Those were three organizations that Foothill Conservancy contacted them, and they had a program that had to do with what to do in small towns that have had the economic rug pulled out from under them, right? So this is not a new phenomenon.
Mhm.
It is a widespread and historical phenomenon.
Okay.
You know, a mine plays out,
Mhm.
there's 3,000 people living in this town, the mine plays out, the town is now a ghost town.
Mhm.
You know, there's nobody there because the jobs went away.
Yeah.
Well, this happened here in West Point.
Mhm.
And so we worked on developing an economic renewal process in which we tried to counteract the results of the closing of the mills.
Okay.
The mining
Mhm.
did not pick up to take, you know, 96.
Yeah.
It was when the mill closed.
Mhm.
And so we kind of did this process.
Okay.
We did town meetings, we had people come in and to help facilitate these meetings. It was very well attended. There was a lot of interesting ideas that came out of it. Um, I'm not gonna say that it solved problems. We did not create a big new industry using this, but one thing it did prove, that back in the early 2000s, people could actually work together to do something together. You know, I don't know if that will work now, I have a feeling it would not,
Mhm.
but there was one of the goals for the Rocky Mountain Institute was to have as many stakeholders as possible. Invite everybody, invite your worst enemy, invite the atheist and the theist, you know, the capitalist and the communist. Invite them all to come in and talk about why do you live here? What is going to keep you here? What kind of things do you think will work? You know, is there a light industry that we can do? Is there recreation that we can create that will bring people in? I mean, you know, it covered a lot of ground.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that that whole process was probably what sparked the very beginning of Steve Walensky's campaign the first time, is material and ideas and the enthusiasm of the people in District 2, at least, where all this took place, we knew that we could talk, right? We knew that we could create something.
Yeah.
And so we pulled from those people who were involved in the economic renewal process, the ideas, and kind of morphed that into this campaign of, for Walensky, at first, in the first part of the campaign, it wasn't about who was going to run, it was what we were gonna run on. What did we wanna see happen? You know, what's the
Okay.
platform? And it was
Oh.
derived pretty much from a lot of the stuff we talked about in the economic renewal process.
Wow. And then was the end result of that the CHIPS program?
Well, yes,
Okay.
Steve got in.
Mhm.
The CHIPS program was part of what he created.
Yeah,
Yeah, so in a way, yes.
Okay.
There's not a direct link, but
Mhm.
yeah, the idea of creating local opportunities, CHIPS was one of those ideas.
So what, were there other ideas that came to fruition in that whole process?
Well,
or-
there was some, I mean, the youth center up in West Point, it was already established, but it was kind of reiterated the importance of the youth center.
Mhm.
You know, the Mountain Coalition for Youth and Families, we have a building,
Mhm.
we have a garden, we have a radio station.
Yeah.
You know, things are cooking along pretty good for the youth center, and it
Mhm.
was enhanced by that early process, right? There was talk about having a learning center, utilizing West Point School for night classes for people to come up and have someone teach quilting or
Yeah.
canning or pressure cookers or whatever, lots of different ideas. That didn't go very far, but there were some classes that did happen because of that. There was another idea that kind of got pushed forward, where you would have a jobs platform where you would have people come in and they needed work done. And you have
Oh.
other people come in with a list of things that they could do. So you would connect the people who needed work done with the people who were looking for work.
Oh, okay.
And that didn't go very far, but it was one idea that got worked on. And what was another one? Oh, they talked a lot about making pellets, you know, for pellet stoves, and you know, and I think there still is some having to do with the cogen.
Okay,
Cogen up on one. I don't think that idea is dead yet.
okay. And there were, I remember that there were people who got their trucker's licenses through that program, wasn't there?
That's possible.
Weren't there?
I'm wasn't familiar with that aspect.
Okay, yeah, so that they, even though they had to go a little further afield for work, they could still live at home, right, in West Point, and then commute a little bit, just because they had their license and could drive, right?
Could do trucking, yeah.
Yeah, so were there a lot of long-time families that had to move when the economic downturn happened?
A lot of people had to move out.
Okay,
A
okay.
long time. I mean, West Point has become a retiree place, so they were as affected by the economic downturn as some of us working folk. But it was a long-time family. I don't know.
Okay. Because it sometimes it seems like that the
I mean,
long-time
everybody's
family-
kids move away, right?
Yeah, but then they always try and come back,
Well, I did.
you know, and you find the work that you can find.
Yeah.
And that's just Calaveras County, right?
Well, you know, I'm looking. Yeah, I mean, the idea of some of the things we've talked about since this economic renewal thing was broadband,
Yep.
right? Being able so that young professionals can come up here and live and do all their work online, and that would bring people up here. But you know, the other thing, wild and scenic designation for the McCollum River.
Yeah.
Now, that not directly associated with bringing jobs, but young people like things to do. If they're moved up into this beautiful area, West Point, Three Rivers, you know, the McCollum, North Fork, South Fork, Middle Fork, Licking Fork, Blue Creek, we've got lots of interesting forest activities that can be taken advantage of by young professionals.
Yeah.
The Coast to Crest Trail
Yeah.
is another big deal. If we can complete the Coast to Crest Trail, that's going to be another draw for people who might choose to live in this area. That goes all the way from, McCollum Hill on up. If we can get that
Yeah.
Coast to Crest Trail finished, have some access trails that go from Moke Hill and West Point, or maybe Glencoe, access trails to this, so you can park
Yeah,
and get to the Coast to Crest Trail and then walk up or down whichever way you wanna go. I mean, I know the Coast to Crest goes to Moore Creek, which is up by Salt Springs, and I think it comes up to the 49 bridge, or close to it, somewhere in there. The Coast to Crest Trail stops, so you have this gap between Salt Springs, which is probably one of the most rugged parts of the McCollum River of the North Fork. I mean, it's taken, the Butte Fire and the Electra Fire have gone through there, but, and there's flumes that go through there, and
yeah,
so that trail really does need to go in if we want to get more young professionals up here, because that's going to be a draw for them, nice
and a lot of
trails.
people do that Coast to Crest Trail. They really do.
They will if
Yeah.
it gets completed.
Yeah,
I mean, the other
in
thing
that area, yeah.
I'd like to think about is bike trails around all our little communities, Glencoe, Railroad Flat, West Point, Moke Hill. How about we be conservative? Let's build bike trails that only go 2 miles outside of town. Including town. You have a couple or 3 roads you choose, and you put bike trails out those roads so that people at least 2 miles from town can get into town. Man, there's more and more people walking the roads every day. You ever run across a person on Winton Road where there's a ditch? The white line is practically part of the ditch,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
somebody walking there, and
Yeah.
you've got a logging truck coming. It gets dicey when there's
Yeah.
people walking on the road.
So are you seeing that there's more visitors coming up into the West Point area?
Visitors, like tourists?
Yeah,
No.
like tourists, okay.
Well, I'm not a person, I'm not one to
Okay.
ask about that. I
Okay.
don't know. We do have the Blue Mountain Event Center, which is out Blue Mountain Road. That's caused a stir now and again, and that draws people. But do they come to West Point? I don't think they
not
do. They
really.
bring all their stuff up to camp and then they leave. They don't stop in West Point.
Oh,
If that has happened, I haven't witnessed it,
okay,
all right?
okay,
I mean, we need more than just an event center. We need a pedestrian-friendly environment, bike and pedestrian-friendly environment, in order to make 7N08 more accessible to people. I mean,
True.
we talked about that
Yeah.
earlier. 7N08, big National Forest Road that is absolutely disintegrating before our eyes
yeah,
because the Forest Service has no money to put into rebuilding National Forest roads. But that would be a great destination for somebody mountain biking. I mean, mountain biking, West Point would be a great place for mountain biking. My kid, Greg, he's a mountain biker. He lives up in Quincy now.
okay,
There are mountain bike races 2 or 3 times a year up there.
yeah,
There's no reason why some of these nice national forest roads around here couldn't be a mountain bike destination. We go Winton Road, Black Springs Road to 4.
okay,
That would be a great mountain bike route.
just to bring those people in.
Or get 7N08 fixed and take Winton Road to Spur 4, 7N08, down into the McCullough Canyon and out Ellis Road. That would be a great bicycle route for mountain biking.
A lot of those roads we were saying earlier you were saying they were accessible though by car at one time.
Oh yeah, like I say, I've driven down 7N08 all the way down there, but now, man, it's
You just can't get through.
motorcycle only,
Only,
or maybe a quad, but even then, I don't know.
okay.
It's a mess. It needs to be rebuilt in a couple of places. And of course, no fire truck is ever gonna be able to get down there.
No, and then that's an issue with fires, obviously. So we're actually kind of running out of time, so I want to ask you like one final question,
Okay.
which would be, what is your favorite thing about growing up in West Point?
Oh, man. I've told this story before, just recently. I drove my parents crazy. I'm sure of it. I don't ever remember repercussions for what I did, but I drove them crazy. From the time I was 4 or 5 years old on, I was not home. Me and the dog were gone somewhere. And not just 50 yards from the house, we were miles from the house. We were gone. I knew where the springs were. At the right time of year, I could eat sour grass. I could eat manzanita. I didn't have to come home, manzanita berries.
Yeah.
I didn't have to come home for dinner or lunch. So this, I guess it's unique, this absolute sense of absolute and total freedom. No fences, ignored fences, far away from home. I knew where all the mine shafts were too. Did I stay away from them? No, I wanted to look down into them. I wanted to throw rocks in there. So I knew where the mine shafts were, even though they were all covered with mountain misery.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, you could really, you could get yourself in a mess
Yeah.
wandering around Bald Mountain Road. But yeah, I would just take off and gone and traipsing around with no limits, just unleashed. Like I say, I don't know what Mom and Dad, they had to have gotten worried. He was only 6, where is he?
So do you think, I guess this wasn't the last question. So do you think growing up in Calaveras County, for most kids even today, they have that sense of freedom?
No, I don't think so. There's a lot more people up here. They're very conscious about their private property. There may be, if you know the right path in between the properties, you could have this same sense of getting away, of being able to get away. But I just don't think so.
It's not quite the same.
No, as a teenager, I had a motorcycle, a little bike, small little Honda 70, and I probably got to know the roads all the way up to the top of Blue Mountain better with that bike than anything before or since. All the logging roads, I knew them. Bailey Ridge and Solinsky's Crossing, which I can't find anymore.
Oh, wow.
Bruce's Crossing, all these places, I could go in this little bike. I could pick the bike up over a fence and keep going. I've been to the top of Blue Mountain more than once in that bike, and just all over the Bailey Ridge. I really like Bailey Ridge. There's logging roads all over the place you can take. And that may still be possible, getting up out of the private property. Sierra Pacific is private property, and they got gates everywhere, but if you've got a little bike and you can get around these things, yeah, there's probably some, but it's not the same as being a little kid on foot with your dog, Okay, you got your bike and you can motocross wherever you want, but it's not the same.
So when you were like 6 years old and you're walking with your dog, were there certain places you really liked to go, or did you just explore?
I really liked the lava caps because there were springs on the lava caps, so there was my water source.
Oh.
And yeah, I like those lava caps.
Okay.
That was probably one of my favorite.
And you just found those by exploring?
Oh, sure.
Oh, okay. Were other kids around exploring too, or you just never ran into them?
I didn't ever run into them. I'm sure there were, but
yeah, but it's a large area.
it was a large area. In 1960, it wasn't. I hesitate to say it wasn't populated like it is now. That wouldn't be true because there was so much logging going on that there were people living up here more than now. I remember West Point having a sign population 885, and it stayed that way for I don't know how many decades, and now it's down to 700 and something.